The point that Bhutan is maybe making is around just how in the last year or so, it seems that part of the work that is being done is being used to capitalize or is being linked to campaigning of sorts, particularly in a province like Gauteng. But that, of course, is a very subjective view. There are those who don't feel that way, who feel that actually the Premier Banyazali Sufi is well within his rights, to do what he's doing and to make sure that they create as many job opportunities as possible, given the high unemployment rate among young people in particular. So there are multiple sides to that particular issue. Okay, so we're going to take a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes that you've sent through from the open line, and then we'll get into our finance slot.
Good morning, Cathy. I also hope that the public order police are ready in Durban so that in case things they don't go according to Mr. Zuma, they can be there so that they can manage the situation. Right now, we don't know the verdict of the court, but I'm just worried that in case things they don't go according to his way, they can always be there to manage the situation. Because if it happens that things they don't go according to Mr. Zuma's wishes, I foresee chaos. Thank you. This is Luzugu in the Eastern Cape.
Good morning, Cathy. Jacob Zuma will forever think we owe him, and anyway, South Africa is scared of Jacob Zuma. That is why he always needs his own law. Starting from Zondo Commission, going to jail, they made their own story to release him. So it shows that Jacob Zuma has always got his own way. He never stayed. He said he wanted his date in court. He never been in court. So, we gave him that way that Jacob Zuma is the end. So everything can be changed to suit him.
Morning, Cathy. This is Magdalene from Blow. Cathy, I like the status of the political arena within South Africa right now, whereby ANC and MK are fighting together. This is a proof that factionalism within the ANC made us suffer, South Africans. So we need to move on. It's the same in the Sesotho language, which says, "Hapo tse pedi di lwana ho safara jwang." So it's high time that the emerging political parties to stand up and make use of this opportunity. Magdalene from Bloom, thank you.
Good morning, Cathy. It's Fred the Trucker here in Gauteng. Cathy, just to remind my fellow listener, KG, we are left with 50 days now to decide, but he is right on point. These guys, they are just there to lead. They don't want to be led. They are scrambling. That's why the ANC is still going to win. Because these votes that are going to be divided between these Mickey Mouse parties and these proper parties, they are just too much. And ANC is still going to win.
Good morning, Cathy and your team. Flores here from the Western Cape. With regards to this whole Zuma saga, is let this guy just be. It's up to the voters to decide whether they want him back or not. But what I can't understand, this guy was terminally ill, about to die. That's why the courts went soft on him. But now he's cutting his biscuit, he's jiving, doing the shoulder shaking. Man, this guy obviously got something in Russia that has healed him miraculously. Yeah, I thought by now he would have been in a bed, struggling to, have a good show. Bye-bye.
Good morning, Cathy. Those we want the truth from, they give us the truth they want us to hear. They don't give us the truth that we want to hear. Those are our politicians. Those we vote for, they bring to us what they want to portray to us. Those are our politicians. those we give a chance to lead us, they give us the leadership that they want us to receive. They don't give us the leadership that we want. Those are our politicians. So as much as we're still led by these politicians, this country will always go into shambles and shambles and shambles until the day we wake up and smell the coffee. Gwena.
Come closer. Over here. Man, oh man, do I have something to tell you. Huh? You know what would happen if you weren't here? No SABC Sport, no Skim Sam, no Uzalo, no Deal or No Deal, no Too Hot to Be Single, no family meetings, no radio, no nothing. Just dololo, silence. But you, my friend, you make it happen because you pay your home and business TV license. Now we can deal or no deal celebrity, Mobango, Hectic 99 and Footspooter. Koze kuse Jovijo. So please keep on keeping on and do the right thing so we can make new memories and tell stories for the now generation. SABC TV licenses. Pay yours, make a difference.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
Well, good morning, Brian Hirsch.
Good morning to you. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. Of course, missing you because you're not in studio today, but glad that you're back with us.
I've got a bit of a cold, so I didn't want to come into the studio.
No, that's fine, Brian. How was your long weekend? That was the last time we saw you.
Yeah, it was fine. Thanks, Cathy. Fine. And yours?
It was good. Thanks for asking, Brian. So this morning, of course, we're talking about the common mistakes that investors make. And this is really trying to unpack this idea that when you take on more risk in the short term, then you're going to be rewarded with great things, great returns.
Yeah, biggest lie in the world. The greater the risk, the greater the reward. Sometimes the greater the risk, you're going to lose your money. It's as simple as that. And we've spoken about the scams going wrong. There are more and more scams appearing every single day, offering rewards, offering unbelievable returns. This is, as I always say, a warning to our listeners. Please be very careful that if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. But I just want to raise something this morning, which for particularly our elderly listeners, I always say I leave them out. Government retail bonds have picked up their interest rates on a 5-year government retail bond this month to 11.25%. That's an enormously good rate over 5 years. Now, many people may say, but who wants to be invested for 5 years? I don't know if I'm going to be even alive in 5 years' time. The point is that over the next, interest rates are definitely going to come down. I mean, it's not just about if interest rates come down. They are going to come down. We don't know exactly when they're going to come down, but we do know one thing, that the timing of rate cuts matters less than the direction of travel, and the travel is downhill. So if you're going to get a return of 11.25, and I'm going to put a caveat there in a moment, 11.25% on a 5-year investment, you are going to do substantially better when interest rates come down, because that's a fixed rate. Now, there's one caveat. You need to understand that it's never the gross rate what you get in terms of 10 or 11 or 8, whatever the case. It's what is the rate that you pay after tax. And if you're in a tax rate of 30%, then 11.25% return is going to give you around about 8%. And if you're in a 40% return, it's going to give you around about 7%. But if you're getting 8 or 9% and you're paying tax, I think an 11.25% rate in a government retail bond over 5 years, it has got a 2 and 3 year rates, which are 2 years is 9.5% and 3 years 10%. I think these are fantastic rates. And the way customers can purchase this, you don't purchase this through a financial advisor. You go onto the website called Government Retail Bonds, as simple as that, and they will explain to you how you purchase these bonds. But I think for our elderly listeners who have got money and they're not paying tax, 11.25% for the next 5 years is a phenomenal return. You're going to be beating inflation by a good 4 to 5%, and that's what you want to do.
So then, Brian, when it comes to the actual risks that we should be mindful of, on our investment journey, how do you know when a risk is too great a risk?
Well, when you're hearing returns, I mean, if I was telling you government retail bonds are paying 14 or 15% as compared to 11.25, that sounds ridiculous. So the banks are paying on a 5-year basis at the moment 9 to 10%. So government retail bonds are not that much more, not as if they're greatly enhanced. But what I'm saying is this is a fixed rate, which you're fixing now. You're lending money to the government. The government's not going to default, even though people are very concerned about it. You still with me?
Yes, I still am. Apologies for that, Brian.
There are many investors who are concerned about governments, but remember, I've said this before, banks do not bail out governments. Governments bail out banks. And we saw in 2008, 2009, when global banks got into enormous trouble and the governments of each country bailed these banks out. So I don't think there's any risk. This is not you're not buying a traditional government bond where if interest rates weaken, the value of the bond drops. This is a fixed rate. So I'm saying to our older listeners, if you're not paying tax and you've got time on your side, even if it's 5 years, you can draw money monthly. It's not a problem to do it, but you're not going to get better than this at 11.25%. And I would be quite happy to put my mother's late, but if my mother was around, I'd be quite happy to put her money into this, certainly if you're not paying tax.
And Brian, often when we hear about sort of new industries that we should be investing in that are doing really well, and in stocks of those industries. We recently, of course, will be told about how technology stocks are, the new thing on the block. And if you invest in those, you're definitely going to get returns that you just can't believe.
Look, understand, when you're investing in markets, you want to be invested in industries that are first world. And we know that technology is with us for years to come. These are not new industries, technology. I mean, if you think about that in the 90s when technologies first came to the fore, and then the big bubble of the early 2000s when markets crashed, those companies which are there still around today didn't have money in those days. These companies have large amounts of money. So within a portfolio, you need to blend your portfolio that gives you, now we're not talking about income any longer, we're now talking about growth. And you talk about growth, there are market risks and there are corporate risks. These technology companies, these pharmaceutical companies, these luxury companies, these PayPal systems, they're not fly-by-night companies. They've got a lot of money, but they will be affected by fundamentals and market risk. They're not taking corporate risk. There's a big difference to buying a stock. Let's use an Amazon. You're not taking a corporate risk when you're using an Amazon. It's a fine company. I'm not giving it a tip now. I'm just mentioning that as a name to use it as an example. But what I'm saying is those type of companies you want to have in your portfolio. I'll just share with you. 81% of South African companies, and that includes 10% of minings, earn more than 75% of their money from investing offshore. 81% of South African companies earn more than 75% of their income offshore, which means if you're earning income offshore, you should be hedging against the rand. And of those 81% companies, more than 50 earn 100% offshore. So let me go back 10 years now. If you'd converted rands to dollars 10 years, and you compare that to dollar, sterling, and euro investments. If you'd invested $100, in other words, 10 years ago, let's assume 1,500 Rand would have bought you $100. If you'd invested $100, 10 years later, that $100 in South African market, bearing in mind that South African companies earn a lot of their funds offshore, that $100 will be worth $121. In America, it'd be worth $301. And that's in the top companies that we don't have. We don't have the technology companies. We don't have the companies, for example, the latest fad is these pharmaceutical companies that are providing drugs where people are losing weight. And as you know, the Americans are an obese nation. And if they're going to change their whole lifestyle because they're losing weight, how it will affect their healthcare going forward, how it will affect exercise. But these are not just fly-by-night. This is top companies like Eli Lilly, that's been around years, Nordisk and Novo Nordisk, Roche, those type of companies that are in this industry. The technology companies, as they develop, they've got so much cash on their balance sheets. They print money, and it's what they do with that money when they don't just pay it out to shareholders. Companies that pay top dividends to shareholders often are saying, we don't know what to do with our money. That's why we're paying dividends. These other companies don't pay high dividends because they've got markets to go into, development. So you need to understand, if you talk about pay systems, I mean, today, globally, no one wants to take cash anymore. They want credit cards. So if you got an Avis, not Avis, if you've got American Express or you've got MasterCard or you've got Visa, every little entry, every time you tap it at Pick and Pay or Checkers or wherever you do, when you're filling up petrol, they are earning money. Luxury companies, the luxury companies of the world, the Louis Vuittons of the world, the L'Oreals, the Estee Lauders, the Ferraris, don't have them here. So all I'm saying is that's why even though South African companies earn an enormous amount of money offshore, it's not translating into market return. But markets do have ups and downs, and you have to ride through it. And that's why we always say investing in markets, you're talking 5-10 years. You can't invest in the market for the next 6 months because you may find you lose money.
So, Brian, what then should we learn? What is the lesson from this pattern that you've identified of where the bulk of business is investing its money? Does that mean that we as individuals should also follow suit, and where we're investing to try and make sure that we're investing offshore?
Yeah. Look, let's first say our professionals, our academia are superb in South Africa. People are really well qualified. Our entrepreneurs are innovative. Our top companies, you can't have better management. You see when a South African leaves South Africa, how much in demand they are overseas because of our ethos, the way we operate. But it's not translating. So it's not that we don't have bad companies here. And if you need income, so the balance between how much income do I need and how much growth do I want? If you need income, this is the place to be because our interest rates are high. Government retail bonds are paying high. Government bonds are paying high. Even our property funds are paying good yields. You've got to look at always the tax. I always keep reminding everyone, it's not the gross yield, it's the net yield after tax that you need to compare. So income, yes. And there are some good companies in South Africa, but the bulk of your growth assets, if you're looking to grow, and even people in their 60s and 70s, because of longevity, because they may be living a lot longer, need to grow their capital and they need to beat inflation. And if you don't beat inflation, you're going backwards. And if you're just putting money in a bank because you're nervous, but you've got a long-term. My mother used to invest, she had 100,000. And every 6 months she used to phone me from the bank to tell me the bank manager told her what she should do for the next 6 months. She kept investing 100,000 for 20 years in the bank. So that 100,000 20 years later was going so far backwards in terms of purchasing power. So investors, the mistakes investors need is they're so nervous about losing money, but losing money on paper in the short term, because you never lose if you hold the asset and if you have quality assets. Get advice. There are portfolio managers, there are financial advisors, all governed by phase, who have a responsibility to provide investors with appropriate advice, understanding each investor's needs, because everyone investors' needs are different. So that's very, very important. So all I'm saying is investors continue to make mistakes. They don't have a strategy. They lack time horizon. They want to see the money on paper, never losing money. They try to buy low and sell high. They act on tips, money in the bank, unrealistic expectations. And they also don't have any tolerance for risk. If you don't take on risk, you will never beat inflation. However, let me say that you can't take on risk for money that you're going to need in the next 1 to 3 years. You need to be conservative and you want certainty. But when you're talking about long-term money, be more.
You know, Brian, as you're speaking, I'm reminded of the fact that one of the other things that, of course, has, I suppose, if you look at the culture of stokvels in the country, it has always been popular, but we're seeing that now coming up sometimes through your scams, where there's group investing that is taking place, and you know, people are encouraged to be part of a group that will invest, you know, in different things, and I'm really keen to know what you make of that group investing, and if that really is a viable means of again trying to create wealth for individuals under a group banner. It is Tuesday. Brian, I'll give you a chance to respond to that on the other side of the news headlines. We're talking finance with Brian Hirsch. Of course, I will also be taking your calls. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. You can send your questions for Brian. You can also dial into studio on that line. And remember, we are talking about some of the common mistakes that are made when investing, and you know, this idea that the more risk you take, then the more reward there will be. When it comes to your choice of investment. For now, it's 10:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Good morning, Cathy. With your news headlines, I am Luyanda Maume. Electricity Minister Dr. Hosien Tsuramukhupa has attributed the current reduced levels of rolling blackouts to Eskom's ramped-up plant maintenance and good management. He presented the government's energy action plan at a media briefing in Pretoria as the country experiences 13 days without rolling blackouts. Scores of MK party supporters have gathered at the park near the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, where former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution case is expected to be heard this morning. Zuma has laid charges against lead prosecutor in his corruption trial, Advocate Billy Downer, for allegedly leaking his confidential doctor's note to journalist Karen Mon during the arms deal corruption case. And the Johannesburg Emergency Services has urged residents of low-lying areas to be cautious as heavy rains persist. The South African Weather Service has issued a warning for disruptive rains in Gauteng. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11. Cathy has your SAFM market update.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 18 rand 53 to the dollar, 23 rand 44 to the pound, and 20 rand 40 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mostly higher at the closing bell. The JSE is mixed in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are currently in negative terrain. Gold is trading at $2,351. Platinum at $976 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $90.51 a barrel.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
We continue the conversation with Brian Hirsch, talking finance. So Brian, let's go back then to the common mistakes, myths that people make when it comes to investing. Group investing? What do you make of group investing?
Okay, so you're talking about a stokvel. Let me understand. You know, because May in South Africa is known. It's called Workers' Month. a month where we focus on issues involving and affecting workers in the country. And maybe I should do a program on stockfalls, because there are so many different types of stockfalls. And there's nothing wrong with group investing, but there are 800,000 stockfalls. So you've got to be very careful. And I don't even know how you would identify which of these stockfalls, probably the ones that have been going the longest and the ones that are more branded. But you get different types of stockfalls. You get savings clubs, you get grocery stockfalls, you get burial stockfalls, you get investment clubs, you get social clubs, you get borrowing. There's all different types of stockfalls. So again, if you're going to buy a stockfall, you need to know what are you buying into. Because remember, it's like unit trusts. If you put a little bit of money in, it doesn't give you the great opportunity of investing in all the different opportunities, whereas through an investing stockfall where there's a larger amount of money, you're able to do that. And also how you withdraw from the stockfalls. So you need to understand all. One thing about stockfalls, they create jobs and actual wealth opportunities. But with so many, you've got to be very cautious about understanding what you're doing with a stockfall. So it's like everything else. Just don't go in because everyone else is in. You have to do a little bit of assessing what's going on. And which stockfalls you join. But I think what I'll do is I'll do a program in the middle of the month on stockfalls. Maybe the week after next, I'll do a program on stockfalls for you. Because it's a booming industry for the South African economy.
Yeah, Brian, some of the things I've seen where people are talking about where they're investing their monies will be, let's say, a group of people come together. They each agree to take out X amount, and then the stokvel invests that money on behalf of the group, whether it's in stocks, whether it's in mutual bonds, whatever the case might be. But as a vehicle for investment, is it a good idea?
Well, it's an easy way to make an investment. And that's, sometimes there are so many difficulties in making investments in these different, they want so much information. But, the savings in a stockfall is very important to understand who's investing the money and what type of stockfall are you going into. Are you going into a money market stockfall, which provides guarantees? Are you going into something a little bit more growth orientated? If you're going a bit more growth orientated, how many years do you need to understand because you need to invest? Because remember, if you invest 1,000 Rand today and you ask me what the value is in 5 years' time, let's assume I'm going to tell you it's worth 1,500 Rand. But if you're putting in 100 Rand or 200 Rand a month, a year for 5 years, which is the same 1,000 Rand, but you haven't put 1,000 in for 5 years, only the first 200 will be invested for 5 years, the next 200 will be invested for 4 years, the following 200 for 3 years, and the last 200 will only be invested for a year. Your 1,000 Rand is only going to be worth 1,200 Rand. So you can't compare what I call time-weighted returns against money-weighted returns, where you put a lump sum away as compared to where you put money away. You can't compare those type of returns. But I will deal with stockfalls. I'll deal with stockfalls the week after next on how one should think about entering in stockfall. But just coming back to the mistakes made, the biggest mistake is investors who don't need money on risk adverse, and they want to stick in the bank and they don't want to take any risk. And 5 or 10 years later, they still got their money in the bank. They didn't have any sleepless nights, but the purchasing power of that money has eroded because inflation. And remember, pensioner inflation in South Africa is not 5.6%. Pensioner inflation is closer to 8%. That's medical aid, transport and food, and it doesn't have all the other components. And then the lack of calculating, the biggest thing is the lack of calculating your own time horizon. So when you say to yourself, I've got money, I need income, I'm prepared to look not 1 year at a time, but 5 to 7 years at a time, you give yourself so many more opportunities to invest and do better than just sitting in banks, in secure banks. You want to get a return, you need to take on some risk, but that doesn't mean you need to take corporate risk. you need to take some market risk, because over years, markets have performed.
All right, Brian, I've got some questions that have started coming in for you. This one is around shares that involved the Radisson Blu Hotel. So this listener says there were Radisson Blu Hotel shares which were advertised for public sale in 2017. I was one of the applicants who bought 50 shares for 1,000 Rand, and till today I've heard nothing regarding that sale. I've tried to call the relevant numbers and emails, but both are dead, so there's nothing there. Do you recall anything of that nature, Brian?
No, I don't. And, you know, I mean, Radisson is a well-known hotel brand, global hotel brand. You know, if we want to take that listener's phone number down, I'll phone that listener and see what document they've got, and therefore be able to try and make some inquiries. But for example, if you're going to buy into the hotel group, there's the Southern Sun Group that's listed. City Lodge is listed. So why would I want to buy into a private company? So when you're going to buy shares, don't be encouraged because you get a letter. Why would you get a letter? Any company that goes to the market, that's a sound, solid company, people can't get shares. They're oversubscribed. In other words, there's more money looking for the shares on offer. So I just say again, when anyone gets offered a share in a private company, when you get a letter, stay away from it. You don't need it. You don't need to be in a private company, which is the problematical. When you want to sell, you can't sell. But if we just take that caller's number down, I'll give them a call.
So Brian, do you think it's likely that this listener was potentially scammed?
I don't know, because the Radisson Blu is well known. I really can't go on. I'll have a look at it and report.
All right. We'll pass on his details to you. All right. I'm going to take some WhatsApp voice notes. Remember, you can also dial in 086 000 2032 if there's specific investment advice that you are looking for. We'll take your calls on 086 000 2032.
Good morning, Katie. Can you ask Herschel? Like, I'm 35 years old, and what I've started doing this year is save like 2,000 each month. So I save it via not a stokvel of sorts, but I'm saving it through a person who actually keeps the money for me. So I just want to know, is that the right way to go, or are there other ways that I can actually get a profit on my savings?
I wonder who this person is that you are trusting to hold that money for you at the end of every month, right, Brian? The risks associated with that?
Yeah. Okay, so this caller made the point about 7 years. So 7 years is long enough to be growth orientated, although if you're putting 2,000 Rand a month, I refer to my previous comments that, remember, 2,000 Rand a month going this year. So this year there'll be 24,000. That'll be there for 7 years. Then the next 24. I would be reluctant to be giving anyone money for 7 years if they're not an investment house. I would rather be looking at an investment house, the Anchors, the Coronation, the Investix, the Allan Greys. 7 years is a nice time horizon. You can be a little bit more growth orientated. You can also have money offshore. And when you go into a collective scheme, they pool everyone else's money, although each person has their own account with that institution, and they then pool it and invest on their behalf of all the investors in terms of a particular risk model that individual wants. You could say, I want to be in gold, I want to be in mining, I want to be industrial, I want to be offshore, I want to be in offshore and technology, all different things. So I would say to the caller, I would be nervous. Not that I'm nervous about the individual, because you probably know the individual, but I think you'll do a lot better by being with an institution and investing in a range of different investors that probably, if you go to a broker and you give them 200 or 500,000 Rand, but if you go to a broker and give them 2,000 Rand a month, they don't have much leeway. So I think look at some of the investment houses that I've mentioned. You can just Google investment houses in South Africa. Africa, and a whole list will come up. Stick with the brands that you know, the Investix, Coronations, Anchor, and all those type of companies, and so on.
Okay. This next question says, good morning, Brian. I've invested with African Bank, so I want to know how SARS will tax me if I've invested for 5 years in a fixed account.
You should be taxed on the interest, even though the interest is payable maybe at the end of the 5 years. You need to check with your own tax consultant whether SARS will tax you at the end of the period, at the end of the 5 years. If you're invested with an investment house, an insurance company on a 5-year investment, they pay tax within the fund. I don't know how African Bank deal with that, but probably you would be taxed on a yearly basis on the interest earned, and have to pay that tax. You'll have to take money out of the African Bank to pay the tax, so that at the end of 5 years you would get a tax-free amount.
Dumisani, you're calling us from Eshowe. Good morning.
Morning, Sisketujani.
Ngiyaphila.
I've got this problem of shares. I used to bought shares by 2017, if I'm not mistaken. I never received anything from Red in hotel at Durban.
So Dumisani, what were you told about the shares at the time?
They said they will pay me after 5 years. And I used to call them after 5 years, and they changed the subject. They said I have to wait for 10 years because they was building, so they never received anything, which is extra benefit.
Okay, so you were able to track down the people who were managing that investment?
That one, they said is Brian Mbono, who's the responsible organizer from there.
And how did you get to learn about these shares, Dumisani?
Sorry?
How did you know about the shares? Where did you get the information from?
It was a program from Ukozi. It was Nongabo Mokens who was DJing that show.
Okay. Let me get Brian then to answer that question. And just a final question from me, Dumisani. When you are buying the shares, the account details that you were using, were they who gave you those account details?
The account I received it to the online. It was an email. It was an email.
Okay, it was an email. All right. Okay. All right, Brian?
Again, you talked about Dumisani investing in a private company. He also made the comment that they hadn't finished. Dumisani, you still there?
Yes.
Dumisani, was it a property investment?
Yes.
Was it property?
Yeah, it was investment. It was shares for making a building, resident building from a hotel. Yeah, it was a hotel. That's why they were used to do it.
Okay, Dumisani, I suggest you get hold of the company, find out who their auditors are. Auditors are independent. They don't work for the company. They provide an independent accounting view. And I suggest you speak to the auditors of that company and find out what's happening, because the auditors have to do a financial report, and they have to make any comments about anything that they pick up in the business. And I think you should be talking to the accountants, the auditors of that particular firm. That would be my starting point. But it's like everything else. When people are offering shares in a project, I don't understand. Why not just look at the shares in our market? We've got wonderful property companies. We've got wonderful companies that you can invest in. And if you don't have large money, you can through the unit trust industry or even the Satrix industry, which allows you to do that, and then you've got access to your funds. But in your case, Dumisani, go to the auditors and ask the auditors to give you a report.
Yeah, I wasn't aware about any shares, because at that time I was listening to calls, and I never know about anything from shares investment.
Dumisani, not in your case, but that's the biggest mistake people move. sounds attractive, and it's really someone. And look, there's nothing wrong with an organization trying to raise money from the public in terms of, and some of them are successful. But you need to have a lot more information. You need to know who the parties are, and you need to know what you're doing, and you need to know the risks you take.
Yeah. Dumisani, I also think it will be worthwhile to go back to Ukhozi and tell them what has happened here. We, of course, will also pass that message on to them so that they can look into this particular matter.
They're listening even now.
Yeah. All right, Dumisani. Dumisani is out in Eshowe. Yeah. Brian is right. We just have to be extra cautious when we're investing, and also trying to understand as much as possible what it is that you're investing in and what are the projected returns of that investment. You can never ask too many questions. It is your money after all, money that you have worked very hard for. So you have to protect it with everything that you have. Xolani, you're out in Boksburg. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. Xolani, go for it.
Cathy, I have a question for Brian. I bought a place 2 years ago at 890,000. Okay. Last year, the municipality increased the rate in taxes, saying the place is now valued at 1.4 million. This year, the municipality has placed on that area. You remember this? They've placed the shacks next to where I live. So the place eventually it will depreciate. It won't appreciate. That's my prediction. So how do I right now my question, can I sell that place because at this moment, or can I reevaluate that place according to maybe a private property and try to sell that place? Or can I just rent it out? At the same time, to rent out that place, I'm skeptic of the risk that there might be no tenants because I'm still paying the bond on that house.
Okay, so let me share with you the way that municipalities are raising money by increasing the values of properties is absolutely iniquitous. I think it's absolutely disgusting that properties today are being revalued upwards when the sale price is downwards. And you need to any rates and taxes you need to lodge an objection. You need to get someone to value the property in terms of market sale. What is the market value of property? What can you get for it? Not what the future value is, the future growth. What is the value you can get today? I mean, I've seen so many people that have objected where the value they can get for their property half of what the municipal value is. That's the one side. But even in your particular side, there may be discounts available at that particular price or value. But coming back to what you're going to do with the property, is it lettable?
At this moment, it's not lettable because it's a house. I was looking in terms of the two-pot system. I'll just revamp the place, make some of the rooms separate, and then try to rent it out. But the risk in terms of me managing the place and getting the tenants and not receiving perhaps the amount which I'm currently paying for the bond, that needs to also come out from my pocket. So that's the issue there.
Yeah, I spoke about that last month, the danger of tenants coming and going, the danger of not having tenants, the danger of maintenance, the danger of all the other costs you've got to pay. You talk about your bonds. You've really got to reevaluate. And when you talk about the two-pot system, the maximum you can get out of the two-pot system come the 1st of October is 1st September, is 30,000 rand. So I don't know how far that's going to go to be able to revamp the property to make it lettable. You need to have a look very carefully at what the viability of this property is, and maybe what the sale value is compared to the municipal value. The municipal value has no bearing whatsoever on the sale price. But you need to have a look at that. I can't comment, whether how much more you'll have to spend and what the hassles are of tenants. That you've got to evaluate yourself, and you've got to evaluate the future prospects of this property. Remember, property is about position, and you certainly need time. I'm not sure. I'm giving you full answer because I don't know all the circumstances of it. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll give my number out today. Maybe you can call me and I'll come back to you. I'll give my number out now. It's 011 880 4888. I'll repeat that. 011 880 4888. Leave your full names, where you're phoning from, and your question. And I will get back to you. And if I can't get hold of you, one of my colleagues will get back to you and help to answer that question.
All right, Xolani, and all the best. And I know how worried you've been about this issue because you've taken a great deal in investing in that property. I remember the first time you called on the open line with this issue.
African champions and top 16 team in the world are in action on Tuesday, the 9th of April at the Loftus Versfeld Stadium at 7:30 p.m. They are on the road to the Paris 2024 Olympic qualifiers as they face Nigeria for the last spot in the Olympics. Join us to #PhilipLoftus. Tickets are available at Ticket Pro at 50 Rand for adults and 20 Rand for children under 12 and scholars in uniform. You can also watch the match live on SABC Sports on DTT Channel 4 at 7 p.m. For more details, visit safa.net and Banyana_Banyana on X.
Last year, the Masked Singer hit South Africa like a storm. This year, the Masked Singer South Africa returns with 16 huge celebrities hidden behind 16 humongous masks. Get ready to be amazed and astonished with brand new masks and performances that are going to blow your mind. Don't miss the biggest television event since Season 1. The Masked Singer South Africa Season 2 premieres on S3 Saturday 6 April at 6:30 p.m.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Brian, I've got two more callers I want to put to you. But before I do that, here's a short WhatsApp voice note question for you.
Good morning, Brian. Good morning, Cathy. My name is John Johnson, and I'm a pensioner, a normal pensioner. I heard you talk about government retail bonds. That sounded so nice to me. Is it possible that I could perhaps invest a little amount I can afford for at least 5 years? Because I hear you saying that the rates are very nice. Is it possible to invest it for 5 years for the least? Please let me know.
Okay, thanks for that question, Brian.
No, they're 2, 3, and 5 year government retail bonds. 2-year government retail bond is paying at the moment 9.5. 3 years paying 10, and 5 years paying 11.25. I don't normally, I'm not normally so firm in my belief, but if you're not paying tax, then the 11.25 is an excellent rate because interest rates in South Africa, as in the rest of the world, are going to come down. It's not a question of when they come down. It is a question they will come down. The timing of the rate cuts matters less, as I said, in the direction of travel. And within 12 to 18 months, bank rates will also be down. So people earning good rates of interest from their banks at the moment are going to get lower rates. Here's a fixing rate. So if you're not paying tax, a 5-year rate at 11.25, you can draw the money monthly, is an excellent rate. It's a safe rate. I put my own mother's money into a government retail bond.
Bongani, you're in Mpumalanga. Good morning, Bongani.
Good morning, Cathy.
Yes.
Yes, I just want to have a question to Brian. Hello, Brian?
I'm here, Bongani. Morning to you.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. Yes, I just want to maybe clarify some, in details, how it means if they say the pension funds, the laws that are going to be implemented, I think, on the 1st of October, somewhere there. How it's going to happen? Because they say from the 1st of October, they're going to be a 2 ports. But at this stage, we only have 1 port. So now, if I'm eligible to withdraw my money on the 1st of October, in which port are they going to withdraw?
Okay, they're actually going to be, strange enough, 3 pots. Your existing money is called the vested pot. Whatever you contributed up to the end of August will go into 1 pot. And from that 1 pot, you will be allowed a one-off withdrawal with a maximum of 30,000, as long as that's less than 10% of the total value. So if the total value of that pot is, say, 200,000, you'll only be able to draw 20,000, but with a maximum of 30,000. The balance of your contribution in the future will go into 2 pots. And the 2-pot system, there will be 2 components in that system. There will firstly be a component in that system of what they call there'll be seed capital, which is your first lot, and the second 2/3 will go into the retirement. The 1/3 left. So if you contributing 5,000 Rand a month to retirement, everything you've contributed up to the 31st of August goes into the vested pot. Now the balance, all future contributions will go into 2 pots. 2/3 will go into the retirement pot and 1/3 will go into the savings pot. And from that savings pot on a yearly basis, you are going to be able to withdraw up to 10% of that pot with a minimum of 2,000 Rands. The only danger is when you draw, it's all going to be taxable.
Exactly that. Meaning, it at the stage when the process starts on the 1st of October, if maybe let's say I'm applying for that, I'm going to only receive the 30,000. It doesn't mean that if I have, let's say 200,000, then the other person have maybe 300,000. It doesn't measure in the difference of the value of your pension fund. From now at the start, it's going to be 30,000 for everybody.
No. It's not going to be 30,000. It's going to be the amount that you have at the end. By the way, it's not the 1st of October, it's the 1st September, and it's the amount you got invested at the 31st of October 2024, which is referred to as the vested pot. And out of the vested pot, you will be able to take 10% out with a maximum of 30,000. But so if your fund is only worth 200,000, 10% of 200,000 is 20,000. You will only be able to draw 20,000.
Oh, it is clear now. Thank you very much for that. Okay.
All right, Bongani.
Yeah. And let's assume you've got 750,000, you still will only be able to draw 10%, is a lot more, 75, you'll still only be able to draw 30,000.
All right. Brian, I also have Joseph in Honeydew who wanted to ask about an issue he's having, which is being unable to access shares that were left by a deceased parent. But it's also 11 o'clock now, so we're completely out of time. What I'll do is that I'll get Joseph then to give you a call directly.
Okay, thanks, Kath. Have a good day. See you next week.
All right. Brian Hirsch back with us again next week. And of course, you heard him read out his radio line, 011 880 4888. Joseph, I'm so sorry we couldn't get to you. It's now 11 o'clock and time for the latest news update.
Thank you, Cathy. In your top stories, Ramakgopa provides update on electricity provision and Gauteng residents urged to remain vigilant during inclement weather. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. Electricity Minister Dr. Ramakgopa has attributed the current reduced levels of rolling blackouts to Eskom's ramped-up plant maintenance and good management. He presented the government's energy action plan at a media briefing in Pretoria as the country experiences 13 days without rolling blackouts. Ramakgopa says electricity supply is currently higher than demand. He says planned maintenance allows for the accelerated sourcing of spares.
We made the point that the ramping up of plant maintenance, very important. And that's why I made the point earlier on that if you look at the period December 2023 going into January of 2024, we took out 18% of the total generation capacity, about 9,000 megawatts at the go for plant maintenance. And we're beginning to see that these machines are coming back into service, they are coming back on load, and they're adding to the capacity on the grid. And this is helping us to address, if you like, the demand.
Scores of MK party supporters have gathered at a park near the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, where former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution case is expected to be heard this morning. Zuma has laid charges against lead prosecutor in his corruption trial, Advocate Billy Downer, for allegedly leaking his confidential doctor's note to journalist Karen Mon during the arms deal corruption case. Tents have been erected where Zuma is expected to address his supporters following today's court proceedings. Today has been set down as a holding date pending Zuma's appeals against two High Court orders that the private prosecution must be halted because it's an abuse of court processes. New figures from Stats SA show 85% of the victims of kidnappings in South Africa are women and children. Criminologist and case officer at Missing Children South Africa, Bianca van Asvegen, says there's a big increase in kidnappings for ransom.
We've got our special unit within the Hawks that deals directly with the kidnapping cases, such as the ransom, but it is very difficult. There's so many kidnapping cases being reported, as an organization and to the police. To handle all of them is very difficult. It's also something that you need to look at is to change your routine, to maybe just leave your house 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later. Do not follow your exact routine every single day. Make sure that you take different routes to work, for instance, or to school.
The Johannesburg Emergency Services has urged the residents of low-lying areas to be cautious as heavy rains persist. They've also advised motorists to avoid routes on which roads are flooded. The South African Weather Service has issued a warning of disruptive rains in Gauteng. The Johannesburg Emergency Services spokesperson is Robert Mulaudzi.
Our motorists are still encouraged to continue to exercise caution, extend the safe following distance, and avoid crossing flooded roads and flooded bridges. We've got our aquatic rescue unit on high alert, so we're pleading with our residents to work together with us so that we can minimize or prevent further incidents which might occur during these wet weather conditions.
And finally, 27 people have gone on trial in connection with the Panama Papers scandal. The issue started with a huge leak of documents 8 years ago. It highlighted how the rich and powerful used tax havens to hide their wealth. The trial is taking place in Panama City. The BBC's Ian Wells reports.
The leak implicated more than 100 politicians, including heads of state and government, billionaires and sports stars. The leak showed how clients of the now defunct Panamanian law firm called Mossack Fonseca were able to launder money, dodge sanctions and avoid tax. If the founders of the firm are found guilty, they could face up to 12 years in prison. The law firm has since closed down, but its founders have claimed neither they, the firm or its employees were involved in unlawful acts.
Recapping your top story, Electricity Minister Dr. Khosie Ntshuramukgopa has attributed the current reduced levels of rolling blackouts to Eskom's ramped-up plant maintenance and good management. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 11:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation. SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation. SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
The fact that the grants are used to meet various needs within a family and I guess to some degree support families beyond just the older person, surely that speaks to a need that needs to be addressed within community and within society.
There's different ways of looking at this. The first time you can say we all know, and advocacy groups for a long time have been saying that the child support grant, for example, is just not enough. It's, as you know, 500 rand. It barely covers food for the child, let alone school fees, school transport, clothes, etc., etc. So similarly with the social relief distress grant, and that's a temporary grant, as we know. The future of that is a bit unclear, although we all know what we would hope for. That at a fairly low, 350 rand level is not even meeting any kind of transport costs for people trying to look for work, people trying to gain employment, etc., and covering their own costs.
Professor Eleanor Moore.
Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Big dreams are turned into reality with the National Lottery. A huge congratulations to not one but 5 multi-millionaire winners. 3 winners won over 44.7 million rand each on Powerball, and 2 winners won over 17.3 million rand each on Powerball Plus on Friday. You could be the next big winner. Pandapusha players must be 18 years or older, play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
8 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of the Talking Point for this morning. Over this hour, we're going to be looking at a problem that is unfolding in the cargo sector, the logistics and supply chain sector of the country. According to the Transported Asset Protection Association, South Africa witnessed over 40,000 crimes that impact supply chains just in the last 12 months. And it's also supported by data from the South African Police Service. While some of these incidents are not only happening at the ports, but also on road. They include truck hijackings, cash in transit robberies, burglaries, and stock theft. Let me welcome onto the show Alvin Harris. He is the president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport South Africa. Alvin, good morning. All right, it looks like we don't have Alvin on the line just yet. Gavin Kelly is the CEO of the Road Freight Association. Gavin, good morning.
Good morning to you, Cathy, and good morning to your listeners.
And Thorsten Newman is the head of the Transported Asset Protection Association. Thorsten, good morning.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity here today.
I think let's just start with you, Thorsten, and if you can just contextualize the problem that we're dealing with here. And again, 40,000 crimes sounds like a lot, but what is the cost of that crime too?
It sounds a lot, and actually it is a lot. So, and it's an extreme situation for the industry, really shipping products and manufacturing products within South Africa. So, the biggest challenge when we talk about, the value or the money which is linked to is that, less than 1% of the incidents are really stating a value. And there are several reasons for that. But we can give you some examples, like the biggest single loss, like a 2 million euro hijack in Port Elizabeth in South Africa, which is roughly right now 40 million rand. So, but you can also see, big losses at the major airports or your harbors, which are always going into a 1 million rand situation. So if you look at the entire situation right now, the industry is under attack, and that's crystal clear. But South Africa, it's a very, very unique market with a very unique situation. And what the industry is facing over the last couple of years is really an extreme situation where we talk about organized criminals or criminals in general attacking our supply chain.
What makes South Africa so unique?
I think it's a situation that in South Africa, the criminals are very active, and it's very violent compared to, for example, to the main countries in Europe. If you look at the global situation, you have similar situations in Brazil or Mexico. But South Africa, it's really always very violent, very organized, and the criminals are really attacking wherever they can. So a good example is, that criminals are even attacking the cargo on the tarmac, on international airports, which is really a very unique situation, what we will not see in Western countries. But you see it in countries like Brazil or Mexico, similar to warehouse invasions. So which means that the criminals will take over your entire warehouse operation, load their trucks and will disappear within a couple of minutes. And that's also a very unique situation for South Africa. And as already mentioned, what is very, very difficult for the industry is that when we talk about the criminals in South Africa, they are always armed. They're always weapons, and always something, which means that the threat to the drivers or to really the people handling the cargo is always very extreme.
Thorsten, I want you just to be perhaps a bit more descriptive so that we understand the nature of some of these attacks that are taking place. So when you talk about cargo that is being attacked on the tarmac, what happens?
The biggest challenge nowadays is that you don't have a black market anymore. Like 10 years ago, you knew exactly when you go to this markets, you are here to buy stolen products. So nowadays, the criminals are really using modern technology and modern platforms, to sell their stolen items. And you can name every modern platform in the world. Criminals are using these platforms to sell their products. When we talk about, for example, an attack on a tarmac, it's really an insider knowledge. So 70% of all supply chain incidents are linked to insider knowledge. So which means the criminals, they know exactly that when the next flight from, let's say, from the UK or from Germany will arrive, and it's a Lufthansa flight or a BA flight, they know that on this flight, they have the newest products from a big smartphone manufacturer or the newest pharmaceuticals, So the majority, of course, it's always very high value items. It's very important. So if you look at it right now, a Euro pallet of the newest smartphones, it's easily 20 million rand. And that's only 1 Euro pallet of smartphones. So due to this insider knowledge, criminals are in a position to attack on time and go immediately and really steal, let's say, 1, 2, 10, 20, or even 30 Euro pallets of high value material.
How do they just steal it, Thorsten? And one would think that there's so many controls that are in place, especially places like airports, places like ports. I'm listening to you speak, and it's like you can just, walk on the tarmac, identify a plane, which is not how it works, right? So how does the theft actually happen?
Okay, it's not so easy.
Yeah.
But we talk about organized criminals, and I think there's another point. When you go to the airport, you are a passenger, so you go, through the normal terminal. You see all the security controls. You walk through a metal detector gate. You see X-ray machines and all this stuff. Okay. What I always say to really people is go to the airport via the cargo area. It's a completely different scenario. Of course, there are security controls in place. You have security guards, you have gates, you have cameras. But it's very important, as already mentioned, that the insider knowledge it's a big challenge.
Thorsten, I don't even know where the cargo area at the airport is.
You don't know it, but the criminals know it, and that's quite important. And it's very easy. If you go to Google Maps, for example, you can easily identify, where the cargo area is. And if you go to, the Johannesburg International Airport, it's not in the front area where you see the passengers. It's always somewhere in the back area, and where all the big trucks are coming through. And that's really quite important, because please have in mind, we talk about thousands of pallets every day, which needs to be handled, which needs to be unloaded. We need to go to the trucks and then will be delivered to the warehouses. What is super important, again, is that the criminals know exactly what they need to target. And nowadays, you can steal everything and you can sell everything. It's not only the high value material. As I said, it's not really only let's say, the smartphones or the latest, PlayStations or Xbox, whatever the brand is. It doesn't matter, or it's the latest pharmaceutical. Criminals steal everything nowadays because they can turn around it very fast and make a very high profit, as I mentioned already. So please have in mind, whilst we as an industry, we always follow business rules. We have code of conducts in place. We have business ethics in place. We have Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. And you said it quite correctly. When we go to the airport, we follow the rules. We go through an X-ray machine or a metal detector gate and so on and so on. Criminals, they do not follow the rules. They are always looking for the weakest link. And whilst we look, how we can follow the rules, they look for the weakest link within this process and try to identify what they can do to steal this €1 pallet with a value of 20 million rand, 100 million rand. So there are a lot of examples, extreme examples. Okay, so for example, there's a warehouse with more than 30,000 euro pallets, and criminals are attacking this warehouse and they steal 2 euro pallets, and the operation is exactly 90 seconds. So they go to the warehouse, they steal the 2 euro pallets, and they left the warehouse within 90 seconds. The value of these 2 euro pallets, and it's an actual case, the value of these 2 euro pallets were 600 million rand. 600 million rand. And it's 2 euro pallets. Thorsten, it's stolen in one country, it's delivered to the next country, and it's sold on the same day. This is how effective their supply chain is.
Thorsten, thanks for that detail there, and really for describing to us so vividly how part of this crime takes place. Gavin, I must say, I'm a bit lost, because when you look at the size sometimes of the cargo that needs to be stolen, when you examine how clinical some of these crimes seem to be, I can't help but think that you would need a lot of people that are turning a blind eye to a lot of things for this to happen.
Is that a statement or a question, Cathy?
It's a question. It's a question, Gavin. Look, I'm trying to make sense of it, right? I'm trying to make sense of it. As a layman who's not in the industry, I'm thinking about these big trucks. A plane has landed. The cargo that's coming off, you have these... what is it? These little lift, the yellow plants on the tarmac that will often be there, the forklifts that are, carrying the cargo from one end to the other. That is not something that, if you're trying to steal that, you're going to need the involvement of a lot of people.
Well, Cathy, I think the first thing that you need to understand, and that your listeners need to understand, is that cargo theft or criminality is a business. It isn't something that is, on the morning somebody wakes up and says, I'm going to go and steal ABC from EFG. It is a proper, well thought out business activity that takes place. And you said you don't know where the cargo areas are at the airport or at the port, but as the previous speaker said, Thorsten said, these guys do all their planning. They know exactly how to get in and out, where the security sits. And of course, that this is almost the same thing as military precision. You know exactly what you're coming to get, how much you're coming to get, and how you're going to need to move that. So some of the items that are stolen are very large items, both in bulk and in size or mass, and some of them are small. So, for example, I can't speak on behalf of what happens in a port or at an airport, but the Road Freight Association runs an index, and we've been running that index since 2009, and we can track what sort of commodities move, and when I say move, what is targeted and what those trends have been. And obviously one wants to work closely with the South African police services and any other security system or process that's in place around these identified items. So to answer your question, yes, it's not necessarily blind eyes that are turned, and there might be a couple of those, but this is a very well thought out process. And a lot has been said around the so-called inside job, where whatever is being done or whatever critical security aspects need to be compromised or shut off, there is always this inside job or highly technical team that is able to do that. So in some cases, you'll see being stolen on the road. And let me give you a couple of stats very quickly. In 2009, when we started the index, the average theft that happened to a truck on the road, the average number of theft, and this is only theft, I'm not dealing with anything else. So, loads that fell off the back or disappeared, there were 5 a day. Last month, at the end of March 2024, in March 2024, there were 21 crime activities per day. A 400% increase per day. And when you're going to ask me, so what are they taking? And I can give you a quick rundown. It's anything from fuel, and you would have heard in the news around coal and chrome, but it's stuff like maize and cooking oil and cement and liquor and cell phones, medical items, cash, and a lot of those you can actually break up, and that's what these so-called syndicates do. They target what they want to steal, and as you would have heard Thorsten saying, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, one of the most important things is being able to resell it. Because you don't want to steal something and suddenly have tons or thousands of these articles sitting, in your own warehouse or in your back garden. So you want to be able to flog it off, to steal it as quickly as possible. So, yes, to answer your question, yes, there is complicity.
So when they're stealing it, Gavin, is it through hijacking the entire truck? So then they take the vehicle elsewhere, offload. Is it that a driver's parked somewhere and suddenly there's another truck that arrives? How does it often take place?
That's just one of the ways they do it, Cathy. As I said, these guys, and when they now get into what you want to call it, big business crime, they hit the supply chain at various points. So, for example, let's take a good example, maize, mealies. So when they steal this, it depends on what the customer wants, and that's something to understand, and hopefully Thorsten agrees with me in terms of this. It depends on what the customer wants. Does the customer want the finished product, or does the customer want the raw product? So we have cases in the maize logistics chain where the maize is stolen off the land as green maize, where it is stolen once it has been harvested. So it's the pips of the mealies. They're on the way to the co-op to be milled or crushed or ground. They get stolen like that. They get stolen when they are in large trucks carrying the maize meal or even the glucose of the maize or the finished product that you and I will buy in a retail store, in a half a kilogram, 2.5 kilogram, 12 kilogram packet. So it all depends on what the demand is. And that's why I said to you, this is a business. This is not just somebody waking up in the morning saying, well, today I'm going to go steal some maize or cell phones or trucks. So if they are going to hijack the truck for the truck itself, not for the cargo, again, it depends whether they're going to take that truck as a working unit and sell it somewhere, or whether they're going to strip that truck for spare parts, repackage them and sell them as new. So it really depends on what the customer, and I say this terribly, customer wants.
Alvin Harris is the president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport South Africa. Alvin, thanks for joining this conversation. So,
good morning, Cathy, and your listeners, and to Gavin and Thorsten as well. Thank you for inviting us and using your platform to highlight this rather dire situation that we are facing.
Alvin, how do we begin to make sense of it? Because of the scale of criminality that is taking place here.
Yeah, it's obviously difficult, and us in the transport and logistics environment, the supply chain environment, we obviously dealing with a subset of the general criminality in our country. I think everybody that lives here knows and feels it, and we've been either a victim of crime or somebody close to us have been a victim of crime or business, or, this is just unfortunately the reality, Cathy, that as South Africans we've lived with, we've kind of grown accustomed to. Unfortunately, the law enforcement services, are not at the levels that they should be to counter general crime. And unfortunately, transport, logistics, supply chain components as a subset of the target of criminals and the syndicates and so on. We're just a subset of that. As large as this problem is, we actually just a subset of the broader macro crime and security problems in the country, unfortunately.
In terms of trying to identify some of these syndicates, would you say that there has been successful work done in that regard? Again, because clearly the syndicates are not just the criminals. You have people in these organizations, whether it's the producers of these goods that are passing on information. If you need to know, if you get to a point where you know the cargo that is in a truck, then that information must come from somewhere. And I think all of our panelists have spoken about insider information. So there's insider information on the part of the producers. Then you also would need insider information on the part of the security guards that are often perhaps hired to look after this infrastructure, whether at the point of the point of collection. I guess for truck drivers who are on the road, the situation might be different. So I'm just saying, Alvin, that it seems to me that the collusion really is it involves multiple players at different points of the supply chain.
Yes, indeed, that is so. And not only with the producers, you've mentioned the truck drivers, and many times truck drivers are part of the complicity of providing the insider information. Sometimes it's an admin person or a sales or finance person within the transport or logistics company, or at the warehouse, or in the rail yard, or in the port or the airport terminal cargo area side. Unfortunately, this is the reality that part of the insider information gets supplied from people within the transport and logistics environment itself, and not just coming from outside, unfortunately. And it is, it comes from all over, and these syndicates will, as Torsten was saying, target the weakest link that they can find. Where can they find a point to push and bribe somebody or threaten somebody and get the required information? Of course, they would use whatever technology and other tools that they might have, and but it's obviously they use a variety of methods to get the information, make sure it's credible, and then obviously send in their highly oiled teams to actually do the deed.
We'll continue the conversation in a moment. We're looking at the cargo incidents, cargo theft in South Africa, the country now ranking 4th with the highest incident rate of cargo theft in the world. It's time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. In your headline, South Africa's largest short-term insurer, Santam, says it has received 160 claims in the past few days for the Western Cape flood damage. Gale force winds have exacerbated fire outbreaks in Stellenbosch and Fischhoek. Electricity Minister Dr. Khosie Ntsura-Mokgopa has attributed the current reduced levels of rolling blackouts to Eskom's ramped-up planned maintenance and good management. Ramokgopa says electricity supply is currently higher than demand. And scores of MK party supporters have gathered at the park near the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, where former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution case is expected to be heard this morning. Zuma has laid charges against lead prosecutor in his corruption trial, Advocate Billy Downer, for allegedly leaking his confidential doctor's note to journalist Karen Mon. I'll have details on these and other stories at 12.
2 years since winning the EFC middleweight title in the most dramatic and controversial fashion, Luke Michael finally defends his belt for the very first time at EFC 112 against the imposing submission machine, J.P. Kruger. And in the co-main event, featherweight champion Iga Smiley Cabeza becomes the next athlete aiming for champ status as he battles the imposing Kaleka Block Kabanda. EFC 112 live this Thursday. Watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The boys of Steve Barker resist to leave the pitch without a ticket to the semis. But there's a big problem. Kevin Hunt's boys say the last dance of happiness belongs to them. This is the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal battle. Stellies versus Matsatsansa Pitori on Saturday, 13 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Big dreams turned into reality with the National Lottery. A huge congratulations to not one but 5 multi-millionaire winners. 3 winners won over 44.7 million rand each on Powerball, and 2 winners won over 17.3 million rand each on Powerball Plus on Friday. You could be the next big winner. Panda Pusha Play. Players must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
Professor John Patricios, the Director of Waterfall Sports Orthopedic Surgery. Do you find that sports people who've taken blows, does it have some sort of an effect on the brain and effectively with memory coming in, replaying that incident back?
Yeah, in a nutshell, there are both physical and psychological effects to this injury. So one of the things about having more robust protocols in place, it gives both the clinician, the medical team, as well as the player confidence that she or he has been through a series of protocols and has cleared them to return at an optimal level of function. So it's not just return to play, it's return to performance.
Top Sport on SAFM. Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at the cargo theft in the country, and South Africa, of course, facing what is an increasing level of cargo theft. Thorsten Newman, head of the Transported Asset Protection Association, Gavin Kelly, CEO of the Road Freight Association, and Alvin Harris is president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, South Africa. Okay, I see. I've got only truck drivers on the line. I'm going to take some of their calls before we go back to our guests. Manukelani, you are in Zanin. Good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Yes.
Good morning, and your listeners and your guests. You know what, Katie, I'm very, very happy to bring that topic into the point. But surprisingly, part of those guests who are there, they don't speak truth among themselves. Yes, we are agreed that we are suffer the consequence of hijacks and etc. I'm the driver also. They must be also mentioning that each and every thing which is happening in case of hijacking and etc. The driver, they became number one suspect. We are subjected to the scrutiny of taking us into the polygraph test, and etc. But at the long run, you will find that the big manager who are running maybe the warehouses, etc., he resigned after a few 6 months maybe. After that, you find him buying the trucks. Where is the suspicion? You see now we find ourselves being victimized because we are lower class in terms of that hijacking. Diesel are theft, tire are theft, and end of the day, the company they're going to bring forward so something like you should have paid this one, otherwise the door is open for you. So we are not enjoying anything of those hijack. I'm happy now because they've tried to find out how does this thing happen. But the bottom line, we are being affected as a driver about those hijacks. Thanks very much.
All right. Manukelani, thanks for the call. Joseph in East London, good morning.
Hi, Cathy, how are you?
Good, Joseph?
All right, fine, Cathy. Cathy, I'm happy also. Mr. Gavin Kelly is there. You know what's happening? Like a previous caller, but not on hijack. You know what, Cathy? If you can hire someone, they have the papers, the right papers, like I say, foreigners. And then, like example, you can hire someone, maybe in your property must work there. You haven't got his ID or it's fake ID or fake document. They know, and then what they do is a cheap labor. They know if you fire him tomorrow, you know each and every corner. Safety begin with you. The road freight is not fair. They must safety begin with you. Hire the right person with the right document in the country. It's a lot of things, Katie. A lot of things. I was expecting this. Since I driving a truck from 1989, I'm on a truck. I see what's happening. So they must just since they hire the foreigners, all those things, know the right document. This thing will happen. It will happen.
Okay. All right. Joseph,
yeah, that's all.
Joseph out in East London. That's one view. Anonymous, you are in Cape Town. You're also a truck driver. Good morning.
Katie, how are you?
Well, thank you. Go for it.
Yes, Katie. The thing now, what is happening here, they can plan everything. You see, like as of last year, I got one of my co-drivers was killed because he didn't cooperate. Because people, they can say, no, we are loading such and this thing like one of your guests, they say that some drivers are complicit of what happened in our hijacking industry. What I would like to see to happen in South Africa, see like the road freight management, all those people, I would like to know that whenever they're hiring especially foreigners, they should have everything from their country, their address, everything up here, all the documents, man, so that when it's something like this happens, we will know how to trace people. Because this, when we found out, it was too late because it was someone who was working here. It was a foreigner. Till today, we couldn't see that person. It couldn't be a traced man. That's a big issue. Actually, I myself am a victim of hijacking. You see, like on my arm, there's still marks of the wires. I almost will also get killed, man. So maybe if they can do that, maybe we'll be safe. I don't know.
Yeah, Anonymous, sorry about the ordeal you went through, but thanks for sharing that experience with us. Let me bring it back to our guests, and I'm going to ask that they include in it then their concluding remarks because we are out of time for this conversation. Alvin, you heard the concerns of the truck drivers. They also is a suggestion there that there is some complicity from some of these companies.
That is undeniable, Cathy, and I am glad. I think that we did receive calls from the truck drivers. I think most transport operators, feel for the truck drivers. They do carry the brunt. They are at the coal face, and they are the first ones to go through the trauma of the hijacking. So again, it's not to point the finger at the drivers exclusively. It was just a case that we do find instances, and in fact, the anonymous caller had indicated that there was a driver, foreign drivers, and whoever, we know that there are many challenges with those issues, and industry has been trying to resolve those for years. But that is, in fact, proving the point that truck drivers do get involved with the planning or providing the inside information. It is not to point the finger solely at them. Many companies or operators and owners of the businesses try to do everything possible to secure the drivers and the cargo and the vehicles. I think all of that, if you don't have those things, transport company doesn't have a business, a logistics operator doesn't have a business. So you got to try to find a balance between that. But the syndicates are extremely proficient. I think you mentioned earlier, just before the news break, they are extremely proficient, very well oiled, and it's beyond just the law enforcement or the people working in the environment. It goes into the court system. It may touch the political system in places, and it's very, very difficult to basically fight against this. But we got to do what we can to stem the tide and begin to reverse the situation. Ultimately, the cost of crime, as is it is with your home, that you got to put in security bars and burglars and alarm systems and electric fence and ADT guarding, and if we don't have basic levels of law enforcement and security provided by the state, the individual, whether you're a private company or individual, you got to bear the cost. On the transport side, the cost of bearing the crime, unfortunately, is always going to end up on the consumer, on the end consumer that's got to pay for the goods. Right. Whether a company's insurance cost goes up or anything, unfortunately, ultimately, it ends up increasing the cost of logistics for South African consumers, and we're concerned about that.
Thanks for that. Gavin?
Thank you very much. I think... I don't recall anyone pointing the finger at drivers. My comments were very much that, this is a business, it's well planned, and there are inside jobs, and the inside jobs doesn't necessarily mean drivers. And the one caller who phoned gave a very good example of it was a senior person in a company that was actually part and parcel of this. So that is what is of concern, is that many companies aren't as security secure, if I can use those terms, as they might think they would be. So it's definitely a struggle. What is also a struggle is that when caught, these criminals seem to get off reasonably easy. So in this case, crime pays. But I agree with what Alvin had to say. I can't add to that.
Thanks for that, Kelly. Thorsten?
First of all, I agree with Alvin and Kevin, and I think Kevin hit the nail on the head here. So let's say nobody is finger pointing a driver. What we say is that the criminals are always looking for the weakest link within the supply chain. And unfortunately, it's in nearly all cases, it's the human. And which means automatically also when we talk about a hijack, it's the driver. But it doesn't mean that the driver is always involved. That's not the case. Insider knowledge also doesn't mean that it's coming from your own company, or it's coming from your trucking company, or it's coming from the shipper. What Kevin is saying is really very, very important. It's a business. It's a multi-billion US dollar business. So if you look, for example, at some numbers, as already said, in the last 12 months, what we recorded as TAPA is that the total loss of all incidents stating a value, and please have in mind that it's only 1% stating a value, it's 400 million rand in the last 12 months. This is what we recorded, actually. And the average loss is nearly 3 million rand. So it's a big business. And that's what people need to understand. And everybody has a price. And that's also quite important. So Alvin mentioned that, either you bribe people or you threaten them. And as I mentioned, if you talk about a multi-million rand operation, and if you give 1 million to whomever, everybody is having a price. And that's really quite important. The most important thing is that we need to work together. It's not a specific problem for a company. It's an industry-wide problem. And it's a big problem. And cargo crime is not a sexy crime. It's not a crime you will see every day on the radar screen or in the media. But it's a big challenge for the industry. And at the end of the day, it's paid by the end consumer. And that's what people need to understand.
All right. Thorsten Newman, let me thank you for your time. Head of the Transported Asset Protection Association, Gavin Kelly's with the Road Freight Association, and Elvin Harris is the president of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport South Africa. On that note is where we leave it on the Talking Point for today. The show back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratile.
Play is disabled by fear. The one cannot exist when the other is in place. When children are unable to play or are prohibited from doing so, they are also denied a vital learning opportunity. At the same time, fewer opportunities to play imply reduced opportunities for the body to develop without undue hindrance and for the brain to grow. The same is true for adults. Without opportunities to play, our chances to learn are encumbered, our bodily and mental health is impeded, we stop growing, biological deterioration speeds up, and love has a decreased chance of flourishing. Chapter 16. Men Who Speak with Fists. I met Perly Joubert in November 2012 at the Queen of Tarts Cafe in Observatory. We had a conversation/interview/idea storm about a project on how to start a social revolution. I do not recall the details of all we spoke about or what I said to her. It was something about fathers who have precarious employment or are unemployed, and the structural violence that underpins and feeds their own interpersonal violence. Something then about the violence arising from social structures that burrows into men's veins and infects their inner lives, and the violence they take out on others or themselves, some even taking their own lives sooner or later. What made me want to meet her in the first place was an article she had written a few years earlier in 2007. The article, titled Men Who Speak with Fists, had stayed with me for two reasons. First, it told a story of an almost uncontrollable drive in some men to control women. Second, and equally sharply, it portrayed some men's need to learn to reference Thich Nhat Hanh one more time, other ways of how to fight with mindfulness. The annual 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign had started the week Joubert and I met. We did not talk about the campaign. The article she wrote was, however, relevant to the 16 Days campaign. It is relevant to the campaign of last year, and this year too. It will be relevant to next year's campaign. And so, in fact, it is relevant to all the other no-violence campaigns until there is no need for a campaign against violence. As we spoke about a social revolution, the 16 Days campaign was then in the background of our conversation. In the times in which we live, all conversations about this campaign are at the same time conversations about men, which is to say, today, all conversations about men's love and men's masculinities have to face up to the fact of men's violence. In Joubert's article, what was as memorable as the men's violence against the women they are close to was what the men she interviewed told her. As I said to her in an email, what struck me most about the men was the apparent inarticulability of their emotional and motivational lives, the not knowing how to speak of their inner lives, rage, pain, frustration, and the sense of emasculation that they could only restore by beating their women. It was in using violence that they show their ownership, dominance, manhood. Sipho says he doesn't know why he beats his Emily. That is how Joubert wrote about one of the men. Chris James said to her, halfway to work, I realized that I'm not satisfied because I didn't manage to have my say. I went back inside the house and then I exploded and I punched her in the face and told her that I've had enough of her shit. I exploded. I did not have my say. Like me, you may not want to say, what the hell? I wanted to cry, to plead, Lord, help the women and the men. I wanted to be roused and enraged, but I knew. Do we all know? We've been here. We've seen all of it. We have heard men like this. Men who want to control women and experience uncontrollable rage when they cannot do so. Although some researchers may feel men pretend not to know how to speak of their anger, express feelings, or being unworthy of love, or control themselves, in order to not take responsibility for their actions, there are men who actually do not have tools to analyze their own emotions and behavior. They do not know, and violence gives them a sense of mastery. I know about not knowing, not having a voice, being at the mercy of others. Though I have raged inside and wanted to explode because I did not know how to articulate what was inside me and why I was so enraged, and I did not get a chance to speak my mind, I hope I will never use my fists to speak. That is really what I wish we men would and could say before we turn violent. You learn to speak. You learn a new language of emotions. It is not BS. Without language, there is only a raging sea inside. Who has never had the feeling of dissatisfaction and unfinishedness and smallness and ugliness when we want to feel big and beautiful? The sense that you could have said it differently, that you could have said it better and won the argument, could have dominated, appeared manlier, or sexier, smarter, cooler, more knowledgeable, more desirable. Who hasn't? Are these men victims too then? Is that what I'm saying? Well, no. Well, yes. As Joubert observes, in part, these men's stories about poverty and its devastating effects. The trick in separating the abuser from the victim, who is also an abuser, is to know when it is one and not the other. What is required is to prevent the boy from becoming a victim in the first place, so that the abuser does not get born. If a boy is raised in an abusive household, there is likelihood of him becoming an abusive man. But because some of us will be raised in just such violent homes, if not violent neighborhoods, where we witness abuse, we need an education in how to fight mindfully, to speak with care and understanding. Chapter 17. Violence wears many faces. I have held back from defining violence up to now, given that many equate violence with aggressive physical contact. This is a good point at which to bring forth other interpretations of it. And there are many. In the epigraphs to this second part of the book, 3 characterizations of violence were presented, one from an English dictionary, another from the World Health Organization, WHO, and the third from the field of peace studies. I will limit myself to considering these. In the Oxford English Dictionary, violence as injury or as damage causative physical force is prioritized, perhaps because this is the most common understanding of the concept. Rape is an example of this form of violence. Other examples include causing injury to a person with a sharp object like a knife or a blunt instrument like a brick, slapping them, running them over with a vehicle, strangling them, kneeling on them, pushing them forcefully, or holding their face underwater. This notion of non-fatal or fatal injury or damage to the body appears in the majority of definitions of violence. When the media report the number of people who have been killed or injured in a shooting attack or bomb explosion, the underpinning definition of violence is this. The Oxford English Dictionary also includes something that is often referred to in media reports: damage to property. This notion of violence is, of course, tied to economic views of property relations. It is a curious idea, unless one takes for granted the idea of private property. Anyhow, when you damage a building, you are, from this perspective, not merely doing violence to the building, but by implication doing harm to the owner of the building. It is the three other definitions offered by the Oxford English Dictionary that add something which is absent from many of the definitions that come to us when we commonly think of violence. In the first two of these, violence is equated with force, strength, intensity, fervor, and passion. Most of these terms can also be positive. Intense emotion, for example, is taken as violent emotion. The last definition of violence in this dictionary touches on constraining or forcing change to happen. This is also unusual in everyday understanding of violence. The definition of violence used by the WHO, which is commonly cited in public health interventions, underscores the explicit inclusion of power relations in addition to physical force. In this view, intentionally injurious acts as a result of power relations between parties are deemed to be acts of violence. It is not obvious in the definition whether the power is unequal and whether the violence is directed only from the powerful to the powerless. Nonetheless, the inclusion of power itself is significant. In feminist theory, rape is related to unequal power relations between men and women. This implies that the rapist does not have to physically attack or hold down the victim. Neither is a threat necessary for there to be rape. All that is required is for there to be absence of consent. An insight to be derived from the WHO is its recognition that injury-causing acts can include physical and psychological acts of commission, hitting a person or telling them they are stupid, but crucially also acts of omission, starving a child or neglecting them. They can also include use of language to hurt or emotional withdrawal. Johan Galtung's conception of violence has opened up a different tradition of thinking about violence and peace. Galtung calls on us to consider much more than just body count and injuries to a person, the body or property in our approaches to and work against violence. An example he gives of a need for a wider conception of violence is this. If a person died from tuberculosis in the 18th century, it would be hard to conceive of this as violence since it might have been quite unavoidable. But if he dies from it today, despite all the medical resources in the world, then violence is present according to our definition. The implied question in this instance is, why is this form of violence, otherwise known as social injustice, not always readily perceptible? The simplified answer is because it is usually part of the normal way the world appears to us. We might say that is the way things are. Actually, a great many resources are used to keep our attention away from recognizing the violence inherent in social structures. Even then, when it becomes unavoidable to see what has happened as violence, such violence is often not regarded as direct violence deserving resources and attention. For example, the violence of a young man who fatally knives another person. Nevertheless, we must underscore that when a woman is about to give birth, yet the nearest hospital will not help her deliver her baby because she does not have medical aid, violence may not be detectable to the eye, but is present, keeping people like her out, sometimes to the point of killing them. The same general idea applies to issues related to unfair discrimination on the basis of race, sex, bodily ability, age, and so forth. If a person dies or is harmed when the death or harm could have been prevented, violence is present, although indirect. All of discrimination on the basis of disability is a form of structural violence, and the same holds for other forms of unjust discrimination. All are held in place by actual or threatened violence inscribed into structures. This understanding of violence as part of systems has yet to permeate societal consciousness. In a country where capitalist economic rules are part of life, you'd expect many people to immediately recognize capitalism as a system kept in place by state-legitimated and sponsored violence, not merely impoverishing the majority, but often causing death, and the killing of mine workers at Marikana, which I discuss later in this book, is a clear example of letting them suffer homelessness.
That was another episode of Why Men Had Women and Other Reflections on Love, Violence and Masculinity, read by Samson Khumalo. The book is published by Wits University Press and is also available online, www.wetspress.co.za. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for SAFM by Jeffrey Matenji. Technical production by Wiseman Manqele.
Well, it's just after 12 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 9th of April, 2024. A very warm welcome to Update at Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour, Hartbeespoort residents want out of the Madibeng municipality in the Northwest Province because of poor service delivery, and the South African Weather Service has issued a warning for rainfall and strong winds in parts of the country. And coming up in sport,
Banyana need to turn around a goal deficit in the Olympic qualifier, and the women's Proteas in action against Sri Lanka today.
More details with John Gericke later in the show. We always want to hear from you, so send us your views. 41391 is the SMS line number, charged at R1.50 per SMS. You can also write to us via X or Facebook, our handle at SABC News_radio. You can also reach us on X using the hashtag #UpdatedNoon, or send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082-692-3909. Well, these and more stories coming up on this Tuesday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, the latest news with Luyanda Maome.
Thank you, Sakina. In your top stories, an insurer receives multiple claims during inclement weather, and Ramokgopa provides update on electricity provision. This is SAFM News. A very good afternoon. South Africa's largest short-term insurer, Santam, says it has received 160 claims in the past 4 days for the Western Cape flood damage. Gale force winds have exacerbated fire outbreaks in Stellenbosch and Fishhoek. Areas such as Paarl, Strand, Wellington, Somerset West and Gordons Bay have recorded storm damage. According to Statistics South Africa, insurance premiums have surged by 9.5% over the past year. Meanwhile, agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo has emphasized the impact of unpredictable weather patterns on farmers.
The western regions of South Africa are the ones that are highly exposed to some of the severe droughts that we have seen over the past decade. So this unpredictability in planting and, of course, the associated costs of that to farmers. This does mean then that for the insurance companies, when they are looking at agriculture, they probably now are much more nuanced about certain regions that they range as more riskier than the others. And, of course, the risk premiums that they will apply in some of these areas will differ according to those difficulties.
Electricity Minister Dr. Khosie Ramokgopa has attributed the current reduced levels of rolling blackouts to Eskom's ramped-up plant maintenance and good management. He presented the government's Energy Action Plan at a media briefing in Pretoria as the country experiences 13 days without rolling blackouts. Ramokgopa says electricity supply is currently higher than demand. He says plant maintenance allows for the accelerated sourcing of spares.
We made the point that the ramping up of plant maintenance, very important. And that's why I made the point earlier on that if you look at the period December 2023 going into January of 2024, we took out 18% of the total generation capacity, about 9,000 megawatts at the go for plant maintenance. And we're beginning to see that these machines are coming back into service, they are coming back on load, and they're adding to the capacity on the grid. And this is helping us to address, if you like, the demand.
Scores of MK Party supporters are gathering at a park near the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, where former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution case is set down. Zuma has laid charges against lead prosecutor in his corruption trial, Advocate Billy Downer, for allegedly leaking his confidential doctor's note to journalist Karen Mon during the arms deal corruption case. Tents have been erected where Zuma is expected to address his supporters following today's court proceedings. Today has been set down as a holding date pending Zuma's appeals against two High Court orders that the private prosecution must be halted